Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Indy Wrestling Experience. I am your host, Bob Richards, and today I am here again with Rich Buchholtz, the promoter and owner of Ragin Pro Wrestling out in Wisconsin. Rich, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Much better than the last time. Now, for anybody who didn't catch our last interview, we tried to squeeze it in with a million other things going on, and I think we did a pretty good job, but we didn't have nearly the time or the focus we needed then. So we said, let's do this again, and let's have it a little bit more relaxed and take a little bit more time to talk about the stuff we want to talk about. Feel a little less pressure this time, Rich?
A lot less pressure. That was a very busy day.
It was, and we tried to squeeze in what we could, but that interview was November 2nd. That was right before Envision 3, correct?
That it was, yep.
And so you and I talked for about 15 minutes. That interview is up on YouTube, and I think we've shared it on our socials.
Yep,
And we had just finished with Destiny 4 the night before. And
correct.
go ahead.
Oh, I was saying correct.
And so so we were talking probably an hour before Envision 3 started, which was the second of two back-to-back shows that you had at Big Apple Pub and Grill in Manitowoc,
Yep,
Wisconsin. Did I say that right? Manitowoc?
that is correct. Yep.
All right, it took me a minute, but I think I finally got it here. Um, I wanted to talk about a little bit about these shows. I wanted to talk about Envision 3. And then you and I talked before we got on the air that you've got three more shows already coming up and booked. So I'd like to hit on those a little bit and see what you've got planned for those. Um, Thinking about Envision 3, the first thing that really stood out to me was the debut of a tag team known as Royal Flava.
Yep.
I had never seen them before. What was your experience before Envision with Royal Flava?
So they were trained by Kenny Anderson. Um, we've tried to bring them in multiple times. It just didn't work out. Like one was injured or they had previous booking or something. So like it finally worked out okay. For them it was pretty stressful because we almost had to shift their match where they weren't going to have a tag match because we had cancellations late that day. So it was stressful for me and them because we didn't know up until Friday night that they were going to be a tag match.
Okay, is that why the ads stayed with just a debut of those guys until the very last minute?
Originally, we were supposed to have them face um, a team from Wisconsin, but one of the guys named um, Doc Simmons wasn't available. He's still injured from Country Air, so we were going to have Country Air versus Royal Flava, and it just didn't work out.
So when that didn't work out, you mentioned a minute ago that something happened and you were gonna split their matches.
I was going to put them in a scramble match, so they would have been facing each other.
Oh, I see. So what happened to get them back into a tag match?
We ended up booking Cave on late. He was a late add-on to the show.
And that's Kevon Lee.
Yep, and he pre- he pretty much came in. He was trained by Hornswoggle and Nick Colucci, so we brought him in, um, and he fulfilled the spot. So that made it be able to be a tag match.
So now in that match, he ended up teaming with Jaden Mercer, who I hadn't seen advertised for the show beforehand. Was he going to be in that scramble match?
He was going to be in the scramble match, yes.
And then Kevon
So
came in late, and you were able to team him up.
yep. So pretty much for doing a double shot, it's very difficult to announce stuff ahead of time. The reason being is when you do announce things ahead of time, it kind of makes people go, well, that looks really scripted. Why would this person be facing this person if they're not the champion or whatever the case may be?
Right. When you say double shot, you mean that weekend you ran two shows back-to-back nights. Is that what you meant?
Correct. Yep.
So, and you had these shows planned out for months in advance,
I did. Yep. It
but
was just a
still, there's all
matter of
those. Go ahead.
we only announced matches that weren't title matches. And I did that on purpose. So like when I talk to talent, a lot of times they're like, well, why aren't you showing my graphic? It's like, if I show you a graphic, it's telling people what's going to happen the night before.
Right.
It's kind of the equivalent of what happens when if you watch Monday Night Raw, all of a sudden they magically have that graphic when somebody wins to qualify for the elimination chamber or whatever else. It's pretty much that same equivalent.
Right, right. And that actually gets me into another match that I wanted to talk about, which I think kind of hits on that theme, which is
Yep,
the six-man match that happened during your Surge pregame show match or pre-event matches.
yep, yep,
Um, the six-man being what was advertised as Shane Hills, Nick Colucci, and WWE's Swoggle
yep,
versus the tag team champions Gen Z and a mystery partner.
yep.
That mystery partner ended up being Salem Crane,
Correct.
who was Nick Colucci's tag team partner.
Yes, they
So
were tag team champions, and they lost a couple months ago. We did a storyline where Salem had to be at a different show, so he wasn't there. So Nick Colucci defended him with Stacy Shadows, and they lost titles at Gen Z. So then on November 1st, they got their rematch and he turned on him.
the rematch against Gen Z, which they lost
Correct.
because Salem Crane turned on Nick Colucci.
Correct. Yep.
So you were just talking a minute ago about the difficulty in what you can advertise and what you can't. How difficult was it to keep this secret at bay with the double shot of events going on that weekend?
It's very difficult. Like a lot of times, I only tell wrestlers what they're doing. I don't tell them what anybody else is doing. And the reason being is because people talk, and that's just the world we live in. Social media is never ending. So it's very hard to keep any kind of storyline going without somebody saying something, and it kind of ruins a lot of moments. So I'm very secretive about like who we're bringing in and stuff like that. If we say a mystery person, most times the talent on the show doesn't know who it is.
So I'm assuming that. Well, let me just ask it this way. So Nick Colucci and Salem Crane, the two people who had broken up the night before, how long before this match did they know that this was coming?
They knew about 6 months ago.
Okay, so they've been part of the deal the whole time.
Yes,
What about the rest of the guys in this six-man match? When were they smartened up?
pretty much around the same time. So pretty much anything that's um based on like a long if they're in the match, I will fill them in on stuff.
So you just used started to use a word long-term um, storytelling. I guess is kind of where you were going. But so 6 months ago, you
Yep,
booked these guys to have the beginning of dissension between them when Stacy Shadows has to step in the tag team match.
correct.
You booked them through the breakup in November and the
Yep,
six-man match the next night. And I
yep.
believe you've got a match advertised for them coming up.
I do. It's in Wapaka for steel cage match.
Is that, well, I don't know if you'll answer me on this here, but is that the blow off, or are these guys going to feud for a while?
Time will tell.
I knew that was going to be my answer. I tried. Um, so another thing, actually, that goes back to this sort of the way that you book these double shots. I
Yep,
was very intrigued over the weekend um, with JDX. He impressed me as just sort of a professional guy who handles his business very professionally. And in the ring, his matches were great. The match with Brick McCarthy is setting up something into the future. How long have you been working with JDX on this story arc?
JDX came up with his own creativity for his gimmick. Like I had nothing to do with his actual transformation of that. He came up with all that himself. He works for Bully Brand, so like that's how we got in contact with him. But he's really good. Like he was another person that was trained by Ken.
I'm sorry, you broke up the trade by who?
He was trained by Ken.
Oh, okay. Ken Anderson, great.
Yep.
Now I know I saw JDX a couple of years ago in Atlanta, but I hadn't seen him since, and it was definitely a much different presentation this time with the artist gimmick. Had you seen any of that before he worked that weekend with you?
I did not. So like when he sent me the new promo pics, we already had the other ones done for like previewing the thing with him and Zilla for Wapaka. And he sent me the thing of, hey, you should use these. And it's like we will once we actually officially advertise it, but like I'm one of those where I want to get stuff out there. So I don't want to wait and see what's going to happen. I want to get it out there as soon as it becomes news. I want it out there. So like promo picks are kind of everyone's got their thing on them. For me, they're not as big a deal as everybody else considers them, I guess.
Right. Now, what you mentioned a minute ago about JDX and his creativity, did you booked the match, right? Like the story for the matches you booked, or was that him as well? Or did he have part in that with Brick?
I booked the finish. Like I don't really worry too much what they do in it. It's pretty much for my job. I'm pretty much a producer without. I'm letting them be their own creative person. I don't get involved in the actual flow of the match. I just let them kind of work their own self. And the reason I do that is because if you become good enough to get to TV, you're going to have producers, and producers are going to try to do things the way they want. But if you haven't been able to call your own match, you're going to just let them do stuff and not question it. And then you could end up getting issues where they typecast you in a character that may not work. If
Right.
that
And
makes
yeah, no, it does make sense. It's interesting. I've never even thought about that before. So that's something that when you book these matches or you book these cards, you've got an eye on what's the future for all of this talent. Where are they going to go, and how can I sort of get out of their way or enhance them, depending on the situation?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, like we only do 3 to 6 shows a year. Like right now, we only have three of them booked for next year. But like my goal is to always have quality over quantity. That's something I've always been big on. I'll fill you in more on it later on, but the person that trained me was very big on that, and that's been instilled in me for 20 some years.
Right. Yeah.
So,
No. We definitely are going to get into that later because this is where I want to pick your brain about being a promoter. So,
yep,
yeah, stay tuned for some more of that in a minute. But while we're talking about Envision 3, I wanted to talk about so the theme so far has been changes in the last minute changes and dealing with what to promote and what not. The what ended up being a triple threat for the RPW Glamour Championship involving Jordan Blue, Maggie Lee, and Lily Ruiz didn't start out looking anything like that. Am I right?
correct.
How did that? What did you originally have booked, and how did that transform?
So originally it was going to be a scramble match to determine who was going to be in, um, who was going to qualify to win pretty much our version of Money in the Bank without it being called Money in the Bank, and then they get to pick who they wanted to face whenever they wanted. But instead, the two people that Maggie was supposed to face ended up having to cancel. So then we just instilled her in the match instead. But like that was pretty much what I was talking about before. If we put that graphic out there of Maggie in the match, in the scramble match, people are going to know that she's losing to Casey.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely it does. And so I guess so. The next night, so you knew Maggie was losing to Casey.
Yes.
That was set in stone.
Yes.
Are you willing to tell me was Maggie going to win that briefcase the next night?
Yes.
Okay. So instead, you end up putting the Glamour Championship on her during a triple threat in which we saw Jordan Blue leave the match early, and she was helped sort of quietly to the locker room. Real injury, or was that part of your adjustments?
No, that was a real injury. She
Is
never took the move before, and she spiked on her head.
oh wow. And I was sitting ringside and didn't even notice that had happened, but I did see her laying at ringside, kind of motionless for a little while.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was. I was backstage with her for about 15 minutes. I talked to her the next day. I've talked to her the last couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks like that. I would check in like every 6, 7 days. Like it's kind of one of those boundary things. You don't want to overstep your boundaries, but you just want to check and make sure they're okay.
yeah.
Um, she was still a little stiff the last time I talked to her, but she's in good spirits. She was traveling yesterday, so she should be fine.
So you think she's back to
Um,
performing?
I'm assuming, but I don't know. Like I didn't see a card, so I don't really know that for sure. But I'm assuming yes.
Right, fair enough. I tell you, one of the things I wanted to talk about for that match, besides the Jordan Blue injury,
Yep.
was Maggie Lee, and I will just want to reference that I've started doing these promotion rankings for the indie promotions around the country. I think I've got 26 men's promotions now and 14 women's promotions that I'm ranking every month. And it just happened to be that last month I saw an uprising women's athletes card, and then I saw Maggie live in Wisconsin in both the Casey Lennox match, which was the night before that you referenced,
Yep.
and the triple threat for the Glamour Championship with Jordan Blue and Lily Ruiz. And that
Yep.
was a lot of Maggie Lee in a very short period of time. And I got to tell you, I am impressed.
She is. She's gonna get signed. I don't know when. I don't know where it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
She's that good.
yeah. And I thought I heard somewhere she's not been wrestling for that long.
She's only 23.
She has an
Um,
incredible amount of talent for a 23-year-old.
I think she's been in the business 2 years, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's been 2 years. She was trained by Seth Rollins.
Okay.
She reached out to me, I think like maybe a year and a half ago, and like I didn't know who she was yet. But like the one thing we do up here that a lot of people don't do is I focus very heavily on women's wrestling because like I want people's narrative to be that they're just as good as the guys. Like this isn't the post attitude era of wrestling. Like a lot of these women's matches, I guarantee you are just as good as the men's, if not better sometimes.
I've been there. I've seen it happen, and I agree with you. I love going to a show, um, you know, like Envision. I mean, between uh, the Jordan Blue match, the triple threat, which we already talked about, but two
Yep.
more matches that I plan to talk about next, both women's matches, both very good matches, and that being Casey Lennox defending again on a second night in a row against Stacy Shadows, and then the main event of the second night, which was Heather Reckless, or as a lot of you TNA fans might recognize her now as Heather by Elegance, taking on Rebecca J. Scott. And I want to start there because I've seen Heather Reckless before. I've been impressed by Heather Reckless before. I've not seen Rebecca J. Scott before, and I was impressed with her. What was your feeling on Rebecca J. Scott?
I actually saw her on Dreamwave, and that's where we came up with bringing her in. So, like a lot of times when I talk to talent, I ask them who they want to face. That's it. Just makes better chemistry, and you don't get sloppiness in the ring. Like a lot of the women that we use have wrestled each other multiple times, so they kind of know little ins and outs of stuff to do that will help build a good story or a great match, whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah, like the first night, the Destiny 4 show on November 1st, I got the sense that Sierra and Laney Luck had done this a few times before.
They have.
Just because they were so fluid in the ring. I don't mean that, I mean in a good way. I mean it looked effortless to them.
It's one of those things where you always want to better yourself, so you always want to work with talent that you feel is above you, and that's how you get better. Because if you continuously work with people that are at your level, you're never going to get better. And
Uh,
both of those are extreme talents that should already have been signed. I don't have the checkbook to AEW or WWE, obviously, or TNA for that matter, but like there's a lot of untapped potential in the Midwest that should be looked at.
Yeah, no, Rebecca J. Scott and Maggie Lee were the two. Oh, and Stacey Shadows. I hadn't seen Stacey Shadows before either, but those were the ones that from these shows that really just stood out to me as people I hadn't seen, but people with a lot of, I don't know, oomph. I guess I'm not coming up with really better words, but just a lot of sizzle, I guess.
Well, Rebecca J. Scott lives in the New York area, so like you probably can see her on the East Coast.
Okay, I will definitely have to check her out over here if I can, and I will take others with me. Uh, you mentioned a minute ago or earlier when we were talking about, that you sort of book the finishes, but you let them kind of create what they want to create in the middle.
Yep.
The Heather Reckless and Rebecca J. Scott match, they ended up brawling in the rafters. Did you know anything about that in advance?
I was tipped off very late to it, and I was okay with it for the simple reason of at least there isn't a lot of people up there because when you have a lot of people up there, you could have something happen, and that's the only kind of things that'll scare me. Is I don't ever want to put our fans in danger. So like it was very well orchestrated, and they did a very good job of being up there and then getting out from there very quickly. So
Yeah, and it looked like you had that sort of upper deck area. It looked like
yep,
there were some fans on one side, but the other half seemed like you were used for like the women's locker room or the gathering
yep,
area up there, and they seemed to gravitate to that area almost like that was the better place for them to be.
yeah, and like they were they came up with that. That wasn't me.
That was a lot of
So
fun.
so like I knew the finish of the match, but like they came up with the volleyball spot and all that stuff.
Right.
Where he's throwing a volleyball at her, sitting in the ref's chair and stuff like that.
Now, I remember, so I was there. You were gracious enough to let me come early and help with setup before those shows, and I happened to be there before. And I was watching the two of them, and I think Heather climbed up into that chair, that perch way up high, and they were working on that volleyball spot beforehand. And I thought they were just screwing around. I had no idea that that was going to be part of the match. And then when they started doing it, that just popped me.
I would be scared to do that because like I ref volleyball for a living. For I work at a sports bar, and my chair is nothing like that. Like there's nowhere to go at the Big Apple. Like you don't have a ladder to go down. You're just up there, like nowhere to move. Like mine is totally different where I work.
Yeah, I mean, if you fall, thank goodness no one fell off of that thing because that was just climbing up. It looked. I don't think I could climb up
I could probably climb up it, but I sure wouldn't want to go down it.
it. Fair enough. Um, so the last match I want to talk about with Envision is the Casey Lennox Stacey Shadows match. You and I already talked about how much we love the women's wrestling. I'm a huge fan of Casey Lennox, but I've never seen Stacey Shadows before. And like the others, I was impressed with her as well. She has performed for you on other shows before, right?
Yeah, she has. She actually worked for Ring of Honor for a little bit.
Did
So
she?
like, yeah, so like her name like's been out there. It's just that she's more an area woman, so like it's easier to get her on a show than say like somebody that's not in the area. But yeah, she worked. I don't know how long she worked for ROH, but she worked for her for a little bit.
Oh wow. Okay. So when you say she likes, so you mean she stays generally geographically, she likes to work within sort of a finite area?
Well, she lives in Wisconsin. Stacey Shadows lives like 30 miles from where I live.
Oh, okay. All right. And but so then you've had her around. You've had seen her in other promotions. She's sort of been around the circuit, I guess, the local circuit with a lot of the promotions.
Yep. So like she was trained by. I'm trying to think out this point. She was trained by somebody that trained me, trained her. If that makes
Who was
sense.
who was that?
Mike Mercury. So like the person that trained Mike Mercury, or Mike Mercury trained Shane Hills. Shane Hills trained Stacey Shadows. So it's kind of like a family tree.
Right. And so Mike Mercury trained you.
Yep.
How long ago was that?
2002.
2002. All right, I want to find out some more about that in a minute, but I want to talk about some more about these shows real quick, and I want to talk about Casey though, um,
Yep,
because I've seen Casey wrestle before. I love both of her matches that weekend, but she does work for you for the promotion behind the scenes too, doesn't she?
she does. She does our website.
So she sort of maintains it, and does she do social
Yep.
media as well?
No, I do all social media.
How long have you known Casey?
Since the day RPW started.
Was that so? How did you guys? So you guys became together through the formation of RPW?
So it was a very interesting story. If you saw the post that we had with Chelsea Green was supposed to work our first ever show, and she couldn't work the show. And I know you're gonna ask about that later, but that's how we found Casey. Was I was scrolling around on Twitter and happened to see her picture, and like once I saw that, I'm like, well, I'll try and see if she's available. Like, and it was the best thing that ever happened to RPW.
Yeah. So then, I'm assuming that means you got her to work the first show.
Correct.
After that, how does the relationship? Well, I mean, obviously she's one of your inside people. She's running your website. Tell
Yep.
me about how did that relate? How did you get close to Casey Lennox? I mean, how do you guys work well together?
She's just very easy to talk to. She's one of the most genuine people you'll ever meet. If I ask her to get something done on the website, it's done in an hour, if that. Like she's very tech savvy, where I'm not. So she does a phenomenal job. I can't praise her enough.
That's fantastic. And I think she's from out here in my neck of the woods. If I read
She
correctly,
is.
I think she's from Baltimore, isn't she?
She's from Baltimore.
That's
She lives in Orlando now, but she's from Baltimore.
yeah, yeah. No, be more represent. You know what I mean? So, well, so we were talking about the shows. You mentioned a minute ago that you've got three shows booked for 2025.
Yep,
Uh, by my look at your social media, that would be Redemption on January 25th,
yep,
Homecoming on May 31st,
yep.
and Destiny 5, which I didn't write down the date, but I feel like it's September
7th.
27th.
Yep.
This past year, you had two shows in November. Are there going to be more shows added to the end of 2025, or is three going to be it?
We're trying to get one later in November. Like it'll be like early November, but like I want to get through his September one because that's a huge building, and I want to make sure like we don't overlook it.
You said
The
it's a huge
Champion Center,
building?
30, it's a huge building. The Champion Center is $36 million that it costs to build it.
Wow.
So like it's got a hockey arena and a basketball arena in it.
And that's for
We're
which
in the
show?
That's for the September 27th show.
For Destiny 5.
Correct.
And now that's a show you've got Ken Anderson booked with Silas Young.
Correct.
I know I've
That's
seen. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, that's a match that's never been done before. It's something that they both wanted. It's very similar to Ken versus Zilla. They both wanted it. I made it happen.
So they,
The issue you run into is that somebody could take that idea and run with it. It's possible, but it's just something that I'd rather hype up something early than let it sit and wait, if that
right.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so these two guys, Mr. Anderson and Silas Young, they're sort of requesting each other.
Yes,
And you said that was the case with Anderson and Zillafat too.
that was. And the reason being was because uh, Umaga's last ever match was against Ken. So that was a full circle match.
The 15
So
years
like
in the making.
correct.
Yeah,
So like until that date, they never met each other. Like they talked to each other, they never met each other.
that's really
So
neat.
like, that was a huge deal to Zilla. And it was a huge deal to Ken.
That's really cool. And it was a really good match. But there was just it was an electric environment, I would say. You know, the crowd was ready for that match when it started.
Yep, they were.
And
Um,
and Zilla has just so much charisma. I know I mentioned that in the interview before, but it just jumps off the page at you.
it does. I mean, he's a lot like his dad. I never got to meet his dad, but just watching him on TV, you can definitely see a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm. So, um, so for Destiny 5, I guess we're kind of working backwards here, but since we're talking about Destiny 5, do you have anything else for Destiny 5 booked that you are ready to share?
Jordan Blue is facing Casey Lennox. That one it should be good to go. So Jordan Blue said that she should be good. Casey, I know is good because she works for RPW, so
Right.
she'll be there.
And we're not saying yet whether this is for a title yet because we got two more shows in between. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, it could be. I'm not sure yet.
Uh, Working my way backwards,
Yep.
Homecoming is May 31st.
Yep.
You've got Zilla coming back
I do.
uh, to take on JDX. You talked about that a minute ago, how you've been you were working your way to that match. Uh, Tell me about setting that match up and these guys' involvement. Did they request each other?
Um, I pretty much will talk to Zilla about like who he kind of wants to face and like if he's worked them before. That's how I do stuff. Like I want chemistry. That's one something I'm very huge on. I don't want guys in the ring that have not wrestled each other because it gets very sloppy. And just want to have a nice crisp match. They faced each other in a fatal four match, and it was pretty decent from what I was told. So
Over
I'm just
another
going off.
promotion.
Yeah, I don't remember which promotion. It was a promotion in Chicago though.
Oh, I see. So you've talked to these guys already about that they've worked together before.
Yes,
And your experience, I guess, if you're bringing Zilla back, I guess you had a good experience with him in November.
I did. Zilla's been great to RPW. Like I've never had an issue. Like what happens if other promotions I can't speak on? He's never done anything to me. He's been very professional with RPW and with myself.
Right. And that's great. It's good to hear. You know what I mean? Because you hear a lot of accounts from people who aren't in the know. Uh,
Yep.
so to talk to someone like you who is in the know, that can you can let people know that Zilla was a joy to work with.
Yeah. I
Um,
like I said, I enjoy talking to him. He's a good guy.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, he seemed like a nice guy. I didn't get a chance to talk to him at the show, but maybe if I can get out there for homecoming, I will.
Okay.
Um, so for homecoming, you've got we talked about Zilla, and you've been advertising, at least from what I've seen, one other match, but without anybody in it, being an RPW heavyweight title match. We don't know who's going to be in any. We don't know either of the participants in that match yet.
Uh, Brick McCarthy will be defending against Silas Young. We did announce that on social media.
Oh, did you? Okay, great. Oh, so Brick and Silas Young. All right.
Yep.
Now Silas, he's worked for you before.
He has Silas and I used to travel together. When I first broke into wrestling, we used to travel together almost every weekend.
How long? Back in the early 2000s.
Early 2000s, so probably 2002 to 2004, 2005, somewhere there.
And Silas is another guy that I know, certainly know, has worked for Ring of Honor among other promotions over the years.
He has a lot of untapped potential that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, every time I've seen him wrestle in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, Wisconsin. I've seen him wrestle all over the place, and I don't think I've ever seen a bad match.
It's very hard for him to have a bad match. Like he's very critical of himself, where he'll critique himself really hard to make sure that everything is perfect. That's just how he works.
The results definitely speak for themselves.
Hmm.
Now these two matches, uh, Zilla and the RPW title match, those are both advertised cage matches, right?
Nope, nope. Those are
Nope.
just single matches. The cage matches, I will tell you one of them on your show will be Casey Lennox versus Stacy Shadows. It depends on who wins on January 25th of who's the champion going in.
And are they wrestling each other on January 25th as well?
Yes,
I thought I did see that. So they're going to wrestle, and no matter what, the rematch is already booked.
yes, that'll be the cage match.
And then so there is going to be another cage match. You're just not going to tell us what it is just yet.
That one we announced. That was uh Colucci versus Salem Crane.
Oh, that's right. I remember that from the show. Colucci and Salem Crane,
Yep,
former tag team partners, going at it in the cage. That one I'll be very interested to see. How these two shows. So you've got Redemption coming up. We'll talk about that in a second. That's in January.
yep.
But for Homecoming and Destiny, for shows that are 6 and 9 months out, how are ticket sales?
Ticket sales for Homecoming, there's 15 front row left, and there's 12 second row left. And then general admissions, they can fit a lot of people in Wapaka. It's an expo center. It's a hockey arena. You could probably fit 700-800 people in the bleachers if you need to. But we just pretty much try and plug the first and second row. And then for Destiny, there is zero front row left, and it got sold out on Friday night. There's 26 second row, and there's 45 third row left. That one we did put a third row because of how big the building is.
Right.
And then there's a balcony upstairs, or sorry, not a balcony, but there's bleachers upstairs. So like there's seating and all that stuff. You can fit a lot of people, and then they have retractable seat bleachers too that they
Mhm.
can bring out.
And that one is just for you're only going to be there for Destiny 5?
Correct. We're the first ever wrestling company to be there.
That's a
Like
pretty cool thing.
if you check it out, it's I think it's called First Credit Union Champion Center, I believe. I could be wrong on that. It's something Champion Center in Appleton. Like that building's huge.
Now, Appleton, that's where again my geography, my Wisconsin geography. That's close to where I saw you the first, where I met you the first time for that for the show in 2023, right?
It's about 30 miles from there. I actually live in Appleton.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
like so like Destiny is a huge deal to me because I live 4 miles from the venue.
Yeah,
So
no,
like
I'm sure that makes it not only convenient, but that's sort of like a homecoming, isn't it?
correct. And then like we'll get into it later, but like homecoming, I'm from the Wapaka area. So like that's where that name came from.
Nice. Um, so and that so but for so now we talked about the other two shows, and I want to talk about Redemption.
Yep.
We when I was in Wisconsin and the for Envision 3, some of those events, that JDX Brick McCarthy match that we were talking about earlier, set up the let's say the most noteworthy match, or the most noteworthy performer coming to guest star at Redemption. So in the JDX match, it was crazy because all of a sudden, I believe is his name Money Miguel.
Yes. Money Miguel. Yep.
So I'm just sitting there in the front row. Thank you very much for the front row seat, by the way, Rich.
You're welcome.
And all of a sudden, Money Miguel runs by me with a belt in his hand, like a bolt of lightning. I had no idea what was going on. I'm taking notes. I'm taking pictures. All of a sudden, boom! This guy goes by me. Next thing I know, the belt's in the ring. People are swinging it, and eventually, somehow, Brick kicks out of getting hit in the head with the championship belt. Then hits JDX with the championship belt and wins himself. It was a wild match. But afterwards, the challenge from JDX and Money Miguel plus Rampage Santana challenged Brick McCarthy and a partner of his choosing, which I assumed would be something you'd announce later. But instead, Brick took the microphone and he announced he already knows who his tag team partner is going to be for that match. Why don't you let everybody know, Rich?
It is going to be AEW's Dan Housen.
That is
Um,
awesome. I am a Danhausen mark. I'm not afraid to admit it. Um, and I would love to get out there for that. I can't get out there for that, but when I heard it, I said, man, I really wish I could see that because Danhausen and Brick McCarthy, that's going to be an interesting team, to say the least, right?
it will be because it's a different styles, but like a lot of people don't realize it, but Danhausen's actually really good in the ring. Like it just
Hmm.
depends what they have him do. Like a lot of his stuff is cartoonish for the character part, but like he can really go if he has to. It's a very similar thing to what Orange Cassidy does in AEW as far as people will say, "Oh, it's parody stuff." It's like no, it's not. It's just a matter of everyone's got their own thing, and it's just based on creativity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to be, like I said, I've seen Danhausen. He's another Ring of Honor guy that I've seen. That I'd seen at Ring of Honor a few times, and I agree with you. I think he's fantastic in the ring, and probably not being utilized to his full potential either right now.
100%.
Um, so this team of I hadn't been there, so I was there for the shows in April, and then in April of 2023, and then I was back out to see the shows in November. So I don't really know the inner workings of JDX and these guys, Money Miguel, and then he brings in Rampage Santana to this match. Rampage isn't even there. How does that all develop? How do you develop those three together?
So that's a Bully brand. They all work for Bully brand. So like that's how that all came about. Like Rampage will be there for January 25th, but like him and JDX team at other places. And then Money Miguel has teamed with them before, so it kind of worked out.
Right. Yeah. And what was I going to say about JDX? I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me, Bob. It'll come back to me. But I was in. Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. Was JDX so? With the same theme of what you contribute to the booking, and what these guys bring to their own. How much input? Had you booked Danhausen and you were looking for something for him to do, or did Danhausen fit into the JDX creativity? How did that work out?
That was just me trying to come up with something to help with first off our sponsors, and then second off, I knew it'd be a good match. So like Bully Brand is one of our top sponsors. So that was a way where we could kind of do two things at once. We could give uh, JDX Rampage and Money Miguel a really good match, make it intriguing for people to see Danhausen and not have to worry about titles and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, titles are important, but they're not an end all be all. If that makes sense.
Right. Um, and so did you have when you booked JDX for this double shot weekend? He wrestled Garrison Creed
Yep.
on the first night, and then the second night against Brick McCarthy for the championship. When you're booking those matches, do you already have your eye on the Danhausen match? Is that part of the long term creative, or was that in pieces?
Yes. Yeah. Well, so like I talked to Danhausen probably I want to say late September, early October. It was like, what are the chances you're available? And he's like, well, right now pretty good. I haven't been used on TV, so it is what it is. Like, it's up to AEW. Like, obviously, if something happens where they need him, they can pull him. But as of right now, he's good.
Right. I want to get into that a little bit later too about the bigger promotions pulling talents and how much of a challenge that is for you, which
Mhm.
I can tell the people listening right now. I've talked to Rich about this off air, and it can get frustrating.
It
um,
definitely.
so when we were in Wisconsin, when I was in Wisconsin and we did that first interview, we tried to see what we could accomplish that day, but there were a lot of things that went wrong on my end, and we didn't get to cover a lot of the things. We didn't have as much time as we wanted.
Yep.
And you and I both basically agreed after that we needed to come back, do this with more time in a more relaxed atmosphere. And you were going to bring some specifics so that you and I could talk about a lot of different aspects of being a promoter, what it's like to run shows, what it's, what kind of hassles there are, what the ups and downs, I guess, are running shows and things like that. And my first question in that regard is we've been sitting here talking about redemption, homecoming, destiny. How do you name shows?
Okay, so the naming of the show is I'm very creative on it as far as I don't want it to be a phrase. I want it to be one word and something that nobody else used or isn't using. We were using Heatwave. I dropped it because WWE started using it for NXT. I don't want a copyright issue, so I just don't want to deal with it. As far as Destiny, nobody's used Destiny that I'm aware of. Homecoming, same thing. Redemption, same logic. Trying to think. Envision, I know of people that have used something similar, but like I just want something that kind of rings, like one word that is like an adjective to or an adverb or whatever the case may be to create buzz for an event.
Right. And do those, I guess when I ask this question, I think to myself, I heard about WCW, I think, in 2000, or no, it was 2001 before they went down, and they were going to change the names of all their pay-per-views. And I think one of them ended up being Sin. And I'm trying to remember, was there a Greed maybe? But the idea, I guess, was that they were going to name all the pay-per-views that year out of the seven deadly sins or have it based on that kind of theme. Do you have anything like that going on? Is there a theme to any of these that tie them together?
No, a lot of it's just one words that are exciting is what I came up with.
Impact.
Our
One.
biggest, one of our biggest shows originally was Extravaganza, and nobody like actually used it as a title. They said, I've heard Impact say like that was an extravaganza waiting to happen, or whatever the case may be, but they never used it as an actual title that I know of.
So I.
So,
So you're not going to use extravaganza anymore?
we still are. I'm just waiting to find out like if we have more shows later on in the year for 2025.
Ah, the late year November thing you're talking about.
Yeah, because like pretty much like if you look at the calendar, October 31st is a Friday, November 1st is a Saturday. So like if we can do a double shot, I will, but that's kind of the wait and see type thing. I mean, like I don't own a ring, so that's another issue. So like we have to plan our shows around other people's shows as well.
Where do you get your ring?
We get our ring from Green Bay. HWE owns a ring. Hybrid Wrestling Entertainment owns
Mhm.
a ring, so we use their ring.
So you use theirs, so you work around their dates, is what you were saying.
Correct. Yep.
Um,
They generally do Fridays,
oh, okay. So you run Saturdays and Sundays to just, or well, Saturdays to avoid that. But
Saturdays. Yeah. I've
yeah.
never I've never had a Sunday.
Um, what other things, as far as like the equipment, do you, as far as putting together a show, the wrestling ring, are there other things that you have to either work in tandem with other promotions or that you share or anything like that?
We don't share anything. I had to go get puzzle pieces for the flooring for the Champion Center show because they're very adamant about not having anything happen to their floor, which I totally understand that. So like we had to get like that puzzle piece protective tile stuff. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about or not. They come in like an 18 piece set.
Like the kinds that have them like kids' playrooms that
Pretty
they
much I
puzzle
have
together.
yes, yes, yep, yep, yep.
So that was for Under the
So
Ring.
it'll be for under the ring, and I'll probably use it for the entrance of whatever I have left.
Okay. So
Just
you
make it.
talked earlier about early 2000s getting into the wrestling business. Without going too deep into it, you've done other podcasts where you talked about how you got into the business, but just give me an idea. When did you start as a fan, and how did you get at least started towards working into the business?
I was a fan growing up. I probably started watching wrestling when I was probably 4 or 5. My mom was actually a diehard wrestling fan. My dad hated it. So it's kind of one of those weird things because you'd think it'd be totally opposite. But like my mom used to go to um it wasn't the Bradley Center, I'm trying to remember which it was a place in Milwaukee, but anyway, she'd go to the matches there and like meet the Crusher and all those Dick the Bruiser and Mad Dog with Sean and all that stuff. So like she was ingrained into it. And then like I watched it because she watched it. So like I remember watching Saturday Night Main Event when I was 4 years old, 5 years old. Um, like the Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant storyline going into WrestleMania and all that stuff. But pretty much I started training the day I turned 18. I went to Mike Mercury's training school and trained to be a referee. Was on pretty good path. I just knew I wasn't going to make it to the main stage, so I took some time off of it and moved to Vegas. Had a good life there for a little bit. Moved back here. Um, did some reffing occasionally. Um, had some minor surgeries that I had to address, and I did that. And then pretty much he did his own thing with the Ultimate Wrestling Trivia, and that kind of gave me the idea of running a wrestling promotion called RPW Ragin Pro Wrestling.
When you say he, you mean Mike Mercury is the one that's running
Yes. Yep.
Ultimate Wrestling Trivia? Um,
Correct.
and I met some of those guys when I was out there. You have a sort of a synergy, a partnership with those guys through RPW too, right?
Yes.
Um,
So I mean, like I'm really good friends with Mike. I'm really good friends with Devin. I'm really good friends with Derek. Um, so like pretty much everybody that works for Ultimate Wrestling Trivia, I'm very good friends with.
yeah, and I've used the app, so anybody who wants to go out there and try it, it's really good. Ultimate Wrestling Trivia app is definitely worth the download. Um,
I don't think they have the app anymore. They actually have a YouTube channel.
really,
Yep. Yeah,
to
I don't
check
think
that
they.
out.
I think they shut down the app. Because their tech guy, I think, left or something. I'm not sure. I don't know the logistics of it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I tell you what, I enjoyed the heck out of it, and what I really liked about it was that you could compete with other people and check your scores with other people, and that made the competitive guy in me came out every month when that those scores reset.
They did a phenomenal job on that. Like the person that I believe did a lot of the questions was actually Angelo Stefano, who is another person that's involved with Ultimate Wrestling Trivia, the YouTube show.
Oh, okay. Do you know Angelo?
Yep.
I
So
mean, like,
he
you
used
just
to,
work together?
yep, he used to live with Mike. So like when I was training, I would talk to him like he was my sports person. Like Mike's a big sports fan too, but like Angelo Stefano was very much like me, where we're both non-Wisconsin fans. So like he's a Pirates fan, I'm a Cub fan. We're both Michigan Wolverine fans. He's a Charger fan, I'm a Lion fan. So
Yes.
we got to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Yeah, two men after my own heart. I think the only yeah, I don't think I like any of the local teams. I can stand the Baltimore Orioles, but that's about it. Um, so you're working with Mike. You
Yep.
train with Mike. Did you know Mike before, or how did you get hooked up with Mike at his wrestling school?
I went to a lot of ACW shows. He was a promoter at ACW before I started training.
And
So
what, did you
like
just
he,
strike up a conversation with him?
yep. So like he trained Ken Anderson and a lot of other people that made it. So if he didn't train him, a lot of people worked for him. CM Punk worked for him. Adam Pierce worked for him. Um, there's a lot of people. I can't think of everybody off the top of my head, but
Is that a well that you go back to? I mean, is your connection to Mike Mercury, his training school, and the folks who have also come in contact with it? Is that a rich pool that you pull from frequently? You got a lot of contacts there.
yes and no. Like I try to create my own paths, but like there will be people that will reach out to me through that, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But like I don't really get too bent out of shape about it either way, if that makes sense.
Right. And when you say you want to create your own path, what do you mean? And when I ask that, I mean, I guess sort of compare that to what you've seen others do that you didn't want to do.
Well, my biggest thing going in was I want the talent to be treated number one, where the talent should get whatever they are promised immediately. And that was not the case when I was growing into it. Not necessarily from Mike's standpoint, it was like other people's standpoints. Mike was always very good to his talent, but like other promotions that I worked for, I would hear the house small stuff, and that never worked for me. So like I wanted to change the narrative of making sure the talent felt comfortable about that they weren't going to get screwed over or anything else. They were going to get whatever they agreed to guarantee to them.
Yeah. Now, and when you say the house small issue, what do you mean by that?
If like if like they didn't draw good enough, they would they would short people money that they were promised. I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself.
Right, right. But what you're saying when you say house is small, you mean that on the back end, promoters will say, "Oh, there weren't enough people here tonight, or you didn't bring enough people in." Is that what am I understanding that right?
Uh, the 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 crowd was smaller than they expected, so they can't afford to pay everybody what they promised them.
And I think you told me when we met before that you try to pay as many people up front as possible.
Correct.
What's the downside to that? Like, what could go wrong?
The downside of it is it's kind of like building a sports team. Of you have a lot of dead money if they cancel, so you have to wait for them to pay you back. You have to book them at a different show, a different time to accommodate the paying of them early. Do the talent like it? I would say probably 90% of them love it. Um, do the promoters like it? I'm gonna probably say close to 80% of them hate it.
And when you say that, you mean your competition essentially. Like you're setting a market that they don't care for. Is that what you mean?
Pretty much, yeah.
Um, do you have any issues? And obviously, I'm not going to ask you to go into any specifics with names or anything, but how often does it happen that you need a talent to pay you back money that you fronted them and there's an issue with that?
Um, I've never had anybody give me an issue with it. They've had to make payments, which I totally understand that. Like stuff happens. Like I'm not about to say, give it to me all right away. Like as long as you make an effort, we're good, is how I look at it.
And everybody that you've dealt with has either paid right away or they've made the effort.
Yep. Yeah, there's no issues as far as that goes. Like everybody's made an effort or is continuously paying it back or whatever the case may be.
Do you consider yourself fortunate in that regard, or do you consider that to be a product of the theme or the way that you operate that you just described for us earlier?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, you pretty much my logic's very simple of if somebody screws me over, they'll never work for me again.
Right. Um, Now that so we before we spoke or before this interview, I sent you sort of over an outline, and we're starting to touch on what it's like to deal with talent, and we talked in Wisconsin a little bit about dealing with last minute changes, and so I want to start on that regard. I want to go back to the first show. I want to go back to Chelsea Green. Um, was that the only? So when was that first show? Tell me again what the date was.
It was Saturday, August 28th, 2021.
2021. So just over 3 years ago. You'd never run a show before. You booked Chelsea Green, and what happens?
Chelsea got booked for NWA Empower.
How how much time did you have in advance to figure that out, or to fix it, or to change it when she
Uh,
canceled?
she told me right away because like I saw it on Instagram that Mickey James reached out to her, and I'm like, this ain't gonna be good. And obviously she took what was better for her, and um, it was a good business decision on her part. Like Chelsea's been nothing but good to us. Like I was very happy that she won the WWE Women's United States Championship on Saturday. Like she definitely deserved that.
No,
But
absolutely.
pretty much we had she had to cancel twice on us. But like she made it up to us by coming in to work Deanna Perrazzo um, on my birthday, Saturday, March 26, 2022.
And so that was her and Deanna Perrazzo. I don't think I hadn't been out there yet. I didn't see that show. Was that an all women's show?
Nope,
Oh,
that was that was supposed to be the main event. Deanna was hurt going into the match, so we changed it to like the third or fourth match of the show.
oh, so
But
she still worked at her.
she did, yeah.
Um, what about the rest of that show? Were there any other last minute changes or things that went wrong, sort of, let's say in those 48, 72 hours before the show? What went wrong?
For the first ever show,
Yeah, the first ever show. Yeah, 2021. I'm sorry.
you're good. We had a lot of stuff go wrong early on, but everyone, as far as I know, was able to do the first ever show that we booked for August 28th. Because like we changed the card so many times that it ended up working out. Like I don't think there was anybody we advertised late that wasn't there, if I remember correctly.
Right. Now, going into that first show, how much, how do I want to put this? What did you think you already knew about running a show going in, and what kind of things did you learn more on the job as you've been running shows?
A lot of things that I was expecting it to be a lot more smooth than it was, like no hiccups on anything. So like when I first started, we didn't overbook uh, wrestlers to be there, and then later on we started overbooking, and it became a reason of if you don't do that, you're gonna have people pretty much trying to get on the show, and that gets annoying because they'll just show up and be like, "Well, I'm ready." It's like, no, I'm good.
Right, because if you're overbooked, you've got way too many people, so they know to stay away because Rich already has enough. Every time Rich has enough. Is that the idea?
Yes,
Um, but so juxtapose that, I guess, with Envision. So as I'm there for Envision, and I had seen what was promoted beforehand, there were a lot of people on Envision who I had not heard about beforehand. I'm not Ethan, Jaden Mercer, Kevon
yep.
Lee, guys like that. In the first match, Adam Grace, Johnny CK. I hadn't seen any of them advertised. I know Johnny CK wrestles for you. I know Jaden has. Are those guys that are waiting in the wings showing up, or did you have them booked just not advertised?
I had a book not advertised. I believe they were going to be a scramble match, but it was a matter of we had to flip a lot of stuff based on the unavailability of the injury for country air.
Oh,
Like
right.
I was waiting for him to see if he was going to get cleared, and he wasn't cleared. So I was like, no.
But you had these guys waiting sort of as a backup plan anyway. You'd already made those moves, put them in motion just in case.
I did. I mean, I wanted to have Royal Flava have a tag match, but I'm like, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. Like, I look at everything based on you're getting paid the same whatever you do. So if you got to change it, you got to change it. Like, that's why I don't go too in depth with storylines because things change on the fly. We use such a high end talent that they're booked all over the Midwest, sometimes all over the United States. So like going too in depth with saying this person's going to be there can get very challenging.
Right. And so for someone who started running shows 3 years ago, you're already sitting here talking about how you like to run high end talent, pay your guys well. How do you develop a reputation, or how do you at least become enticing enough as somebody who just started 3 years ago running shows? How do you become enticing enough for guys like Zillafat 2 and things like that to even want to come in to work with you? How do you get that kind of reputation that fast?
It's based on word of mouth. As long as you're good to your talent, they speak highly of you. Um, we I get people that reach out to RPW all the time that was trained by Seth, was trained by Ken, was trained by Booker T, was trained by Devon Dudley, um, because other people that we brought in say good things about us, and then they want to work for us because they know they're not coming in and being wasted. Like it doesn't matter like what they do as far as the match itself. They know that they're going to be taken care of. They're not gonna look bad. They're not gonna. We'll take care of them.
Right. And is part of that when you have these last minute changes, do you I don't know, this is just an intuitive thing on my part. I have no idea, but is this just the kind of thing where when you have to make these last minute changes, you are careful to try to have them affect your higher end talent less than the others, or is that not even a consideration?
Um, a lot depends on. It's kind of like a puzzle piece. If it fits, I'll make it work. If it doesn't, I won't. Like I prefer not to mess with any matches we advertise. So that's why sometimes I won't advertise a match on purpose. That way, if there is an issue, we can fix it without people knowing there's an issue.
Right. Are the I could call them high end talent, but yeah, I think you know what I mean. Your AEW, WWE guys or your
Yep.
guest stars. Do they give you more grief for last minute changes than the regular talent do?
I've never really had an issue per se with anybody giving me grief over their stuff. It's a matter of as long as their biggest thing is as long as they don't look bad and they're taken care of as far as flights, hotels, transportation, they're pretty easy to deal with.
And since we're talking about that, another aspect of being a promoter, flights, hotels, transportation. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what is it what does it take to get, somebody like, Zilla Fatu? What does it take to make all the arrangements to get him to Wisconsin for your show?
5 minutes on clicking on a keyboard.
Okay, no, so I mean like I mean, do you pay for the flight, you pay for the hotel, um, you pay for all that, and then you pay their booking fee on top of that.
Correct.
And do you have like we've talked tonight about three sort of towns where you run shows. Do you
Yep.
already have sort of deals set up or things to your advantage, that partnerships that make that cheaper on you financially?
I'm a Sky Miles person. I'm not sure if you're really familiar with Delta Sky Miles, but like a lot of times I try to use Delta Sky Miles for flights,
I'm
where you
not,
can
I mean, I
get
know about flight miles, but I don't know if deltas are specific. Can you go ahead and describe it a little bit for us?
so Delta you can get miles for like you can I think I have like 60,000 miles. So you can get a flight for probably 30,000 miles, and that's a $12 flight. So you could hypothetically bring in a Zillow 2 for $12.
Huh.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. Um,
Okay.
do you have anything like that works like with the hotels or anything like that? Like, I remember when I was in Manitowoc and I stayed, it was at the Harbor Town Inn.
Harbor Town, yeah.
Yeah. Do you run a deal with them or any of the other hotels? Do you have sort of a bulk rate when you bring talent in or anything like that?
We did in Green Bay. We don't anywhere else. A lot of times I just look ahead. So like wrestling booking is actually just part of what I do because of we live so close to where the Packers play. I have to look and see if the Packers are going to be home. So if the Packers are home, we have to book our hotels immediately. So like that's why I book my shows so far out because like say the Packers are home that Sunday, The room that's originally $125 is going to be $300 per room because they're going to get people to pay it for the pack rings.
So
The
you don't.
advantage I have
Go ahead.
was,
I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
oh, you're good. So pretty much like the advantage I have is Devin is a season ticket holder. So like he can tell me before they announce it on air, probably like 6 hours beforehand, this game is going to be the day after your show. Get the hotels immediately. So like in Vision 2, we're clicking on hotels before we ever announced anything because I had to make sure I had enough hotel rooms for wrestlers before they announced it to the media that the Packers were home that day.
So you don't stay away from Packer home game weekends. You just plan accordingly and well in advance.
Correct. I mean, like, I prefer that they're not home, but like, there's nothing we can do about it. So
Right.
we just gotta pretty much try and get the hotels as soon as possible.
On the weekends where you've run um, like a Saturday show when the Packers play at home on a Sunday, have you seen a noticeable impact or effect on your crowd size?
Um, our crowds are usually pretty even keel. It's anywhere between I'd say 175 to 300, somewhere in there. Like the one thing that I'm big on that not everybody is, I don't like cops. So like my personal opinion on like the WCWs of the world, the reason I think that they went under was because when you're giving away tickets constantly, you're never going to get people to want to pay for them because they're always going to think they can get in free at the last second.
Yeah, I know we've heard tons of the horror stories from back in those days about them papering buildings like that.
Hmm.
And you're right. I mean, in all kinds of business, I guess, if you get people expecting something is free, it's going to be a real hard time to make them start paying for it later.
100%. I mean,
Uh,
it's pretty much the equivalent of I work at a sports bar. If we um, serve just water and that's all they ordered, well, you're not going to make a lot of money on water.
right.
So
Um,
it's kind of the equivalent.
yeah. So in that regard, I know that you and I have had a few conversations off air about this. I know you're excited about it, and honestly, I'm impressed by it. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about marketing Ragin Pro Wrestling. In our conversations offline, you have told me a lot of really cool things that you've done that you're excited about. Let's start with the promotions and how you tie those in at the events with the tickets and all that kind of stuff. Explain that for the fans. Well, the merchandise sales and the raffle tickets and how they're all tied together.
Okay, so like the reason we do merchandise and ticket sales together or merchandise and raffles together is because it gives people an extra incentive to get our merchandise because at least if they don't win, it's kind of like going to a fair. There was when I was a kid, there was the pick a duck. You pick a duck and you win a prize. It might have been small, but at least you got something. Our concept is you buy our merchandise, you get raffle tickets. Even if you don't win the raffle, at least you got cool swag to wear around or whatever the case may be. So, and it gets our brand out. So we keep our stuff reasonable so that the families can do that. Um, Raina does a phenomenal job of working the merchandise table and help sell our stuff. Like she came along at the end of 2023 and has been working for me ever since. And our merchandise has definitely increased a lot. So I definitely have to thank her for that.
Yeah, and Raina's not just the one at the merch table; she's also the one in all the photos online, isn't she?
Correct. Yes.
Hey, pulling double duty, whatever it takes to sell merch. Yeah, I think she's doing a great job too, at least from what I've seen. Um, what else? What other kind of things have you done to market Raging Pro Wrestling?
We do contests occasionally. We will do stuff on the radio. I've got to be on WAPL with Ken Anderson twice, which definitely helps. Working at a sports bar, I talked to a lot of people about us. I ref volleyball at the sports bar, so like a lot of those people have come to our shows just because they like the way I ref volleyball. I ref volleyball very similar to if you ever saw the show American Gladiators when they do the ready ready thing. That's what I do. So like I make it very interesting where a lot of people are very vanilla, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I've actually seen you referee wrestling
Yep.
as well. And how does that how does that compare to the volleyball referee persona? Are they similar?
They're very similar. I'm very theatric. Um, it just makes stuff look so much better than it is. If the person's emotionally involved, they're gonna want to. People are gonna want to see it. It's
When
the way I.
Yeah. When I was out there the first time, you refed one match. The last time I was out there this past November, you didn't ref any. How often are you refereeing for your own promotion?
I very rarely ref. Um, one of my surgeries, I got extremely sick. So like that was one of the things I had to pretty much stop taking bouncing on around. So I had a cyst in my lower back that almost burst, and that's what caused me to not be able to do a lot of stuff.
So your limitations on refereeing doesn't have any. Does it have anything to do also with how difficult it is to run a show and perform at the same time, or is it mostly the physical issue?
It's both. It's both. It's not that I don't want to be out there, but it's a matter of I like being at the door. I like being the person to greet the customers. Um, I've always been a hands-on person because I can't look at somebody and go, "I expect you to do this if I can't do it myself."
With your face to face at the door with all these fans, I got to assume you've got a fair amount of what I guess we call regular customers.
We do. And like the one cool thing is when anybody buys tickets, I can see right away that they bought tickets.
Mhm.
So like I get a notification immediately. So that's I've actually had a funny story where it was like funny but sad. I had a customer come up to me and he didn't know who I was. And he's like, I want to, can you tell Rich that he was very nice and very helpful and all this stuff trying to accommodate us for our tickets and get us seated together and everything. And I'm like, sure, I'll let him know. He's like, okay, thanks. I'm like, just so you know, I'm him. And like he almost broke down. I was like, it's okay. So it's one of those cool feelings where you get people to talk more openly if they don't know who you are.
Right,
It's kind of like the undercover boss logic.
right. No, absolutely. But on the flip side of that, do you have face to face with the regulars? I mean, is there a significant amount of people that walk in the door and they're like, "Hey, Rich"?
Yeah, we get good majority of my regulars. Some of them know me by name. Some of them I don't know by name. I know them by face.
Huh.
Um, there's people if I do know them by name, it could be a good, it could be a bad. We'll go with that.
Right. Absolutely, I'm sure. Uh, what about in terms of promoting the promote or running the promotion, marketing the promotion, we touched on Ultimate Wrestling Trivia earlier and your sort of partnership with them. I think you mentioned to me that they ran a show either under your banner or something like that recently.
They did. Um, they did a show on August 3rd. That was their show. So
Well,
they like it was their show under our umbrella more or less.
how does that work? And when you say under your umbrella, what is your contribution to what's under that umbrella?
Just our name.
So it's
Like
Raging Pro Wrestling presents.
Raging Pro Wrestling Ultimate Wrestling Trivia. The show presents. I don't remember what the show was called off the top of my head. Like they did all the booking for that. I had no input on that, which was totally fine. Um, it was a trade, like pretty much they paid me for the trademark name, which is totally agreed upon, like so totally good.
Did they work with you on any of, I mean, independent wrestling, it's not like you've got contracted talent, but I mean, do they call you and ask you to connect them with talent or anything like that in,
Yeah,
in that process?
I have people that'll hit me up consistently of, hey, I know you worked with this person, and a lot of times I'm like, just reach out to them. If you give them my name, more than likely they probably know who I am. They may not know me by face, but they definitely know my name
Mhm.
because like people get back to me way quicker than I would have ever expected. I've had people Zilla got back to me before I ever knew him within 7 hours. And like now I actually talk to Zilla quite a lot. Like I mean enough that we're good, we're tight. So
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. So have you ever let any other promotions or any other entities, I guess, run anything else under that RPW banner?
no, and like I mean it's just a matter of we run a certain style. So like everyone's got their own thing. Like we don't really I don't really have enemies per se. Like we just do our own thing.
Right.
Like I do mine, they do theirs, and I don't get involved in theirs, and they may comment on ours, but whatever. I don't really get involved into drama stuff.
It's probably smart.
Mhm.
Um, I, so so Ultimate Wrestling Trivia runs under your banner the one time. Do you ever run like joint promotion shows, or have you ever?
I have not.
Is that something you're not interested in, or just hasn't happened yet?
Um, not really interested in because it's becomes a matter of when you do that, you gotta kind of like play 50-50 of who's gonna bring this person in, who's gonna pay for this person, and I'd rather just do everything myself.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Well, I don't know. One of the things that I did with this terrible segue, want to talk to you about though was well, I guess I'll call it TV, but um, from watching what you have done, most of your streaming is on YouTube, right?
Yes, and we don't have that anymore because we don't have our camera guy that we used to have.
Mhm.
But we were on YouTube, yeah. So I mean, like you can find Chelsea versus Diana on YouTube.
Mhm.
Um, I just it became such a headache that I was just like, to me, it deters people from going. That's just my personal opinion. I think if people can watch it for free 4 days from when it happened, you're gonna get people that'll do that.
Right.
And at the end of the day, like unless you're having all a ton of subscribers, you're losing that money by doing that.
What about the pay-per-view model? Have you ever used it or considered it?
I know people that have. The last I was told, you need $800 just to start it, so that'd be 80 buys just to break even,
Hmm.
and plus you need to have the perfect signal. Like it's more of a headache than it's worth in my philosophy.
Right. Now, what about the platforms that are sort of sprouting up now? The big ones being like Fight Plus or IWTV. Have you ever worked with either of them? And that's not got to be different models. It's a subscription thing, but and I got to assume they've got their own sort of in-house system or setup that makes all of that easier on you. Is that something that you would consider?
Down the road, if we became big enough, possibly, but like a lot just depends on contracts. Like we have a huge contract with the Champion Center where there's certain stuff we can't even do. I don't remember everything. Like there's a 10-page contract, but like I know there was something with streaming, and I'm like, a lot of, a lot of stuff I try to keep as simple as possible.
Mhm. So your focus has been, and it seems to be the fans, the live fans,
Yes,
the people you get to come out to the show and actually attend and engage. That's your primary focus.
correct.
Have you dealt with, or have you looked into? I mean, you mentioned to me a minute ago what the pay-per-view model would cost you. Have you looked into the specifics of the streaming and decided against it, or have you just not even looked into it really?
I've looked into it for a little bit, but like to me, it's a matter of you're paying so much overhead that unless you're guaranteed to have pre-sales on it, I wouldn't touch it. But that's just me speaking myself.
And in the same vein, there's a lot of options for the ways that people can buy tickets to the shows. And you and I talked that you've used two of them. Um, Previously, Eventbrite, right?
We started with Eventbrite.
And we talked about this a little bit in our interview before our short form interview, but flesh it out a little bit for us. Working with Eventbrite, what was good, what was bad?
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
Sorry, well, working with Eventbrite, or when you were selling your tickets through Eventbrite, what was the good part of that? What was bad?
The good part about it is they advertise for you. The bad part about it is they charge you 10% of each ticket. So like the issue we ran into was we were charging the same amount for the door as we were for advance. And if they're charging 10%, people aren't going to pay $4 more to buy them in advance. Does that
So when you said the 10%, the customer gets charged that, or you get charged that?
they were getting charged that.
So
We
you get is 10% surcharge on top of whatever the ticket fee is.
correct. So if it was $40, they were paying 44.
Were you getting negative feedback about that, or was that something that just sort of didn't sit right with you from the beginning and you decided to change it?
Um, it was a little bit of both. Like pretty much, we went for Eventbrite because that was the one I knew of, and like Mike helped me set it up, which he was awesome at doing it. It's a headache to set up because you got to do the whole map and everything, and I just didn't care for it. It's a England company, um, but I know a lot of companies that use it. I just don't like the 10%.
When you
Like,
say, go ahead, sorry.
oh, I was gonna say like we use Square for our online sales, and I believe that's 2.9. And Clover we use for the door, and I believe Clover is like 2.9 or 2.8.
Is that charged to the customer or charged to you?
That is charged to me.
So you,
For Clover's charged to me, Square is charged to them.
okay. So it's easier to set your ticket prices because you can incorporate all of that right into it.
Correct. So like I believe when you bought a front row ticket, I believe it was $30 and then $1.65 or something like that. So it'd be 31.65 for the front row.
Um, yeah, and so you said something earlier that caught my ear, and that was when you use Eventbrite, you have to do the map. What does that mean?
Okay, so you had to create a map of what the building looks like and then create the seats. So like they're able to pick their whatever seat they wanted. So like hypothetically speaking, you're going back into COVID era where people are going to purposely skip seats. So you're going to have 1 through 4. The next group's going to take 6 through 9. They're going to skip seat 5 on purpose because they don't want to sit by somebody else. That's another issue you're dealing with.
Um, and so yeah, so I guess if you're using the square, that you're taking in the money and then you're assigning the seats yourself.
I am assigning the seats myself. So like any customer that buys RPW tickets, I will manually text them or email them where they want to sit and try and give them whatever they best I can. Like if they want an aisle seat, I try to make it work. They want a middle seat, I try to make it work. It just a lot of it's just way easier if they pay in advance. Like if they buy them early. Um,
Yeah.
there,
Well, that's good.
oh, I was just gonna say there are times where somebody's wanted 12 tickets, and we'll ask our other customers if they'll move. I've never had it where they won't,
Right. Huh.
but it's one of those things where a lot of companies don't do the assigned seats.
Mhm.
I do because it's the certain customers want to be at a certain place. They want to be together. If I can't make it work, I can't make it work. But I try very hard to make it work.
And that's because I mean, you run enough shows or a few enough shows, I guess, in a year where you have that time with people. You could take the time to build all those relationships and get those things right before the shows. Is that part of your thought process?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I try to be professional, but I also try to be as communicative as possible with our fans. Where if they have a question, I will answer them as quick as possible. Um, I don't take an off day. I kind of have the Vince McMahon logic of there's times where I'm getting hit up at my shoot job of working at the bar, and I may not respond to them right away, but I definitely see it, and I get back to them as soon as I go on break or whatever the case may be. Um, like a funny story was I was actually roughing volleyball when Deanna Prazo got back to me to work for RPW. So I was like, wow, that's quite cool. So like I'm in the
Yeah.
middle of roughing the game, and all of a sudden I see a thing of Deanna Prazo's email going, "I'm good." Like, okay,
Yeah, switch gears to that and switch gears right back to the game very quickly, I would imagine.
correct. So like there's a lot of times where full discrepancy, I'm roughing volleyball and doing social media at the same time.
I can't I got to imagine you're not alone in that. Uh,
It's it's just one of those things where I have to multitask. That's just how I am.
right. Now, so when it comes to running a show, all these things you're dealing with people, text messages, shoot job, all these things. But
Hmm.
one of the things that I brought you back here to talk about, and that you and I talked about beforehand, was the nuts and bolts of what it actually costs you to run a show. Um, what can you tell us about that? I mean, what kind of costs? I mean, I guess people who wrestling fans, would imagine that renting the building costs money and getting a ring costs money, but take us further than that.
Okay, so um, you got to figure in the travel, you got to figure in the hotels, you got to figure in the booking fees, um, you got to figure in just cost of if something breaks, you got to have that in. We pay for chairs. A lot of the venues, the Manitowoc one, I know for sure we have to pay for chairs. We got to pay for advertising. You got to pay for the printed tickets. Like those tickets come from Montana. We use a company called Event Group. So like none of that stuff is just like a piece of paper that I write the tickets on. That's all printed. It's way more fancy, but I think it means more. Um, I don't know if I told you this or not, but like I came from retail, so like my whole life was based on supply and demand and retail shopping and stuff like that. So like
Mhm.
Black Fridays were always a big deal for wherever I worked. I worked at Target for a very small time. I worked at Kohl's for 9 years, and I worked at Shopko, which is like a Wisconsin store, for 5 years. So like I'm very big on the whole landscape of trying to sell merchandise and give customers the best bargain possible.
Right. And that printed ticket is like it's value for something you pay. It's a little extra value for something that you paid for that maybe you didn't even expect to see a nice printed ticket like that. Like,
Well, 100%. I mean, a lot of places don't even use tickets. A lot of places will use a wristband or whatever the case may be, which that's totally cool. Like, I mean,
yeah,
you don't have
yeah,
to
but
you don't have to use a ticket.
Yeah, but there's very few of those wristbands in my wrestling memorabilia drawer. I can tell you that. But there's a bunch of those tickets.
Good. And that's the one thing I miss from going to events now is you don't get that hard copy ticket. I miss those days. I miss the days of having the ticket of Monday Night Raw or the ticket of WrestleMania or whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you definitely can't throw a QR code into a merchandise bag or anything like that. It's gone, basically.
Mhm. Yep.
Which is like you said, it's got plenty of benefits for our society nowadays, but it's one of those little things. That printed ticket, it's a little thing that definitely struck with me, the printed ticket, because it's not just a throwback, but it's like I said, it's like that little bit of value that maybe you weren't even expecting to get. Um, which I think is just a nice touch. Um,
It's just something that we've always done. Like that was something I was very adamant about.
right.
Uh, we don't raise our prices for, say we bring in a Zillow, say we bring in whoever, I keep the prices the same. It's a matter of when people know that we're running, they know that you're going to see something. You just don't know who you're going to see necessarily. But the card, I'll always try and make the best card I possibly can. We had it before where we had Tessa, then she had to cancel, and we brought her back on because she was available again. And we had to flip people to back to that show because they wanted to see Tessa.
Hmm.
And that kind of stuff just happens. Like I don't like we just keep our prices the same. We don't jack them up based on anything, and that's just my model. That's not like a thing you have to do. Obviously, it's just something I believe in.
Right. So you don't, yeah, you're not going to raise the rates because you got a bunch of guys on there that are overpriced guys. You're going to plan yourself and book space them out, or you're going to book things so where they're getting the value. If
Yeah,
it's a $30 ticket, they're getting that $30 value every time, maybe a little bit more.
yeah. I mean, like the show that Chelsea and Deanna were on, Kenny King versus Silas Young was on that show. Um, Aria Davari was facing TW3. Xavier Walker was facing Rohit Raju. It was a stacked show. Cody Hall was on that show. He just lost his dad 2 weeks before that. We didn't know if he was going to be there. Like it was very weird for me to be like, "Hey, I'm really sorry about your dad." Like just trying to check and make sure you're coming or you're not coming. Like it's a very awkward conversation.
Right. Yeah, I imagine. I'm shocked to hear that he actually came out and performed.
He did.
Hmm.
He did.
Um, so with we talked a little bit earlier about marketing, and then you just mentioned advertising again. Any other things that you do? Let's say Redemption 4 coming up in January. What advertising have you done or will you do for that show that's not something you've already talked about here today?
We pretty much just do a lot of Facebook ads. Otherwise, we do just social media posts. Unless there's somebody that the radio stations want to hear, they're not going to bring me in. It's just one of those things where their time is limited.
Mhm.
So like it's got to make sense. Like I'm sure that when we bring in Ken versus Stylus, I'm sure I could probably get on a local station and plug it. But like a lot of these places don't know who some of these guys are, so they're not going to do it. That's just the reality of the situation.
And that's so going back to this, you told us earlier that you had done radio with Ken Anderson before these shows in November. How does that work? Do you say I got Ken Anderson, I'm going to reach out to the radio stations, or do they find out and reach out to you?
I reach out to them. So Devin works for a radio company, so he was kind of my hookup for it. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Is I reach out to them and then they either go yay or nay.
One of the things that we touched on earlier that I said
Yep.
I would come back to is dealing with the bigger promotions, the ones with contracted talent and them pulling talent or changing your plans at the last minute. Well, I think of WWE, AEW, and TNA being the main culprits here in the United States. How is it working with those three promotions, and how are they with communicating with you if they have to pull people or things like that?
I've never directly talked to anyone in charge for TNA or AEW. I've just been lucky enough to mainly have them not pull them. So like a lot of times it can get tricky though, like if the wrestler doesn't tell me they're back with the company. So like when Jake was our champion, he didn't tell me he signed with Impact. Obviously Impact ran the same day as us. He's not going to be there now. Which I mean, totally cool. Like I get it. Like I'm a promoter that tells the wrestlers if you can do TV, do TV.
Right.
So I don't like. I mean, I love our fans dearly, but at the same point, I don't want our wrestlers to miss on an opportunity of possibly getting signed to do our show.
Mhm. Um, yeah, and so you don't really deal with, I guess, so when these things happen and wrestlers get pulled from your shows by the bigger promotions, your dealing is not with the promotion, it's with the talent, really.
Correct.
And they'll call you and say, hey, AEW pulled me for whatever reason and I'm out.
Yep.
Does that happen? I mean, I know we talked about last minute cancellations happening often, but do people getting pulled, does that happen often?
We've had it happen somewhat, but I mean, like, they let me know far enough ahead where it's never been a huge deal. Like, you get fans that are a little upset about it. Like, we had Brian Keith advertised for our February show, and he got signed by AEW the week before our show. Like, there's nothing I can do about that. Obviously, he got signed by AEW. They're going to use him on Collision. Collisions run the same day as our show.
Um,
So,
right. So, and that's just where you pivot to one of the guys that you sort of have, I don't want to say backup, but I mean, you overbook guys.
yep,
And then when something like Brian Keith happens, you're able to pivot to one of those guys you got overbooked.
yes. And like, it's one of those things where we purposely will not put some people in main event matches for that reason. So, like, if someone has to cancel, it's not good, but it's not like, oh my God. Like, we've
Right. And so
been,
you're talking about not people's reputation for canceling, but just the layout. Like, okay, I'm going to book this guy, but it looks like there's a good chance he might not be here. So let's just take precautionary measures.
yeah, I mean, but it's just one of those things where we won't put them in the main event necessarily. We'll put them in the middle of the show or whatever the case may be, and we'll have a different main event.
That makes
So
sense.
yeah, it's just one of those things where it's kind of like an insurance policy type thing.
Right. But I mean, the whole thing, I guess, is just really fluid. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of variables and things that are sort of happening in real time um, that you have to deal with sometimes from a volleyball referee's perch, huh?
Yep. There's been
Um,
times where I'm getting messages while I'm roughing.
believe me, I can believe it. I do not want to be, now that I've seen that perch, though, I don't want to be sitting up there getting any text messages. I'll leave
Well,
that to you.
mine's different. Mine's different than the one you saw. Like mine, there's a ladder and there's a chair. There's they're like I'm not gonna fall. There you could fall.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought Heather was going to fall.
Oh, I did too. I was kind of nervous. I was like, oh, there's a lot of chairs. That could be really bad.
So as we're running out of time here, I'm really interested in this, so I do want to cover this last topic with you before we go, and that is at least so I'm just an attorney, a personal injury attorney with a blog, but in my travels, I guess, and all the different promotions, one of the things that's popped up to me or that I've noticed is how some of the promotions use what I'm calling the wrestling school model, and others don't, and by that I mean that you have a wrestling school and you generate revenue by running the wrestling school and taking in tuitions, but that also creates a crop of talent, homegrown, ingrown kind of talent that you use for shows that are sort of almost always available or loyal to you, at least at the beginning of their careers. Am I describing that model closely to correctly?
You are. I don't have a school, but The reason we don't is because first off, you're competing with a lot of people that do have them, and second of all, like if they're not what you hope they would be, you're kind of ingrained to use them. And each person is a spot. Spots are very valuable. So you become very gridlocked in certain stuff. Like if we did have a school, where are all the spots going to be for if we wanted to bring in somebody? I don't want to have 14 matches on the show. I've had shows where we had 11, that was enough.
Right. And if you
Like,
feel indebted to 12 students, that takes up 12 spots before your show even starts getting booked.
correct.
Um,
So that's why I don't do it.
what you said earlier that you trained with Mike Mercury at his school. Was that a sort of a model that he used? Did he have a promotion that he ran sort of and used the talent?
He did. I mean, like back then though, like you could use a lot of people from Chicago, Minnesota, and stuff because, like, I mean, gas prices back then were a buck 50, $2 at the most. Nowadays, you're looking at 275 to $4. Like, you're most people aren't bringing in people from other areas or they're carpooling or whatever the case may be. So, like, he used a lot of people he trained, but he used a lot of people that he had connections with too.
Right. And that's a way
I
to
mean,
keep sort of that the bigger talent coming in while also using
mhm.
your students.
I mean, like Mike had TV. I never had TV.
What did
So
he have
like Mike
TV
had
through?
UPN.
Was
It
that was
was
that
UPN
local
32.
UPN out there or was that national?
No, it was here, but
Interesting.
it was called ACW, All Star Championship Wrestling.
Is that now? So is that promotion still around?
Yes, but it's ran differently. Um, it was sold to somebody else that changed the name, and then the new name is ACW Wisconsin. It was actually owned by Nick Colucci and Hornswoggle.
Oh, currently it is.
Yes. So like if the name's been changed and like there was difference as far as like um the original ACW was bought and turned into something else and then they turned theirs into I don't know the whole story because I wasn't there, but like it was a very complex thing. But
Right.
like pretty much a naming thing is now ACW Wisconsin and it's out of Oshkosh out of Green Bay.
Okay. And HWE is different, but they've also run through a bunch of different names too, right?
Yes. So like they were the ones originally that was kind of like in between it. They were WPW after ACW. So like it was just a lot of different changes. So I mean like I was part owner of a company called Mercury One Wrestling with Shane Hills, Rob Norwood, Mike Mercury or Mike Krause's real name. And then I was a fourth owner. I was 21 at the time. I'm 40. So like pretty much it ingrained me to do what I do now. As far as
Sure.
it set me up to be able to own my own company and kind of do things the way I want to.
So those early days when you were 21, that's you got to watch and see a lot, I guess.
Correct.
That sort of
Um,
let you taught you what to do, and what not to do over time, I guess, as you watch them run shows and
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's stuff I do. There's stuff I do that others don't do. There's stuff I do that some will say are incorrect. It's just something that works for me.
right, right. So in
I'm
that vein, as we wrap up here,
Yep,
we're talking about three shows on the books for next year, maybe four, or if you can run more.
yep.
But other than that, what does the future look like for Ragin Pro Wrestling? And by that, I guess I mean, how would you like to grow, or what would you like to be in the next 5 years?
I just want to keep growing. I want to see people get signed to TNA, to WWE, to AEW, my goal is always top priorities are the fans and the talent. Do I want to succeed 100%? But I want to make sure that our fans are getting their money's worth, and I want to make sure our talent is being represented the correct way, in my view.
Mhm.
So, like, I want to see our talent be able to use their footage and send it in to the representatives to get dark matches for those shows and hopefully get exposure. Um, Post their match graphic and hopefully it can draw to get bookings. Like, I mean, I'm very happy Heather Reckless finally got signed. In my opinion, she should have got signed a year and a half ago. Um, but I'm very happy she finally did get signed. So
Yeah, and I got to tell you, it's great seeing you, pat, your people on the back like that on social media as well. You mentioned earlier the post you made about Chelsea Green. I saw that where you congratulated her on becoming the first ever Women's United States champion for WWE. And then in the same day, I think was when you also posted something about Heather, and how great it was to see her doing so well in TNA, which it is.
yeah, and when I post stuff, it's not me like sucking up or anything. It's a matter of that's generally my thoughts. I mean, I'm the person that's doing all the social media, but I'm also genuine when I do it. So when I like, for example, like when I talk to sponsors, and hopefully we get more of those in the future, um, I tell them you're going to be more than a little square on our poster because at the end of the day, you're trusting in us to um, get exposure, and you're giving us your money to get the exposure. The least we can do is at least plug your product. Is the way I look at stuff.
And with that, Rich, we've been going at this almost 2 hours. I really appreciate you taking this much time with me. I could keep asking you questions forever. I am just so interested in all these things. But I appreciate you letting me pick
We
your
can
brain.
definitely probably in the next couple of weeks. I'm off on Monday nights. We can probably make it work again.
Okay. All right. I may keep you to that.
Sounds good.
Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity. We've got Redemption coming up on January 25th, Homecoming on May 31st, Destiny 5 September 27th. Where can people get tickets?
They can get tickets on rpwprowrestling.com.
Okay.
And then there will be tickets eventually available at Look Sharp at the Foxford Mall for general admission. But if you want first or second row, you gotta get them online.
Okay. All right. And give us some places they can find you on social media.
You can find us on Instagram or on Facebook. It should be under Ragin Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, just look us up and follow us. Like our content's usually very fresh. We try to plug our matches. We plug our sponsors. We're a very genuine company that wants to see people grow. Is the best way to say it.
Absolutely. Rich, and I wish you nothing but luck at that. And I know you and I will be talking very soon.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich.